They walked onto the plane like any other family, dressed neatly, speaking politely, first-class tickets in hand. Amara Benson, her husband David, and their 12-year-old son Miles were looking forward to a peaceful flight home after a long week of business and school functions. But within moments, their presence triggered something ugly. A flight attendant, without even checking, accused them of being in the wrong line, suggested they were trying to sneak into first class, and insisted they step aside. Passengers watched in awkward silence. Whispers swirled. Confusion turned to humiliation as the family was escorted off the plane, not for causing trouble, not for breaking rules, but simply because someone decided they didn't look like they belonged. But what no one on that plane realized, least of all the flight attendant, was that this family didn't just belong in first class, they owned the airline. And what happened next wasn't just a reckoning, it was a lesson that would echo through the entire aviation industry. This is the unbelievable true-to-life story of how a quiet family trip became a bold stand for justice, and how a woman's assumption cost her far more than just her job. The airport pulsed with energy announcements echoing overhead, the squeak of suitcase wheels trailing behind rushing travelers, and the smell of strong coffee drifting from nearby cafes. People hustled to their gates with urgency, eyes glued to boarding passes or phones. Amid the sea of motion stood Amara Benson, calm and composed like still water in a storm. She wore a crisp white blazer over a deep green blouse, heels clicking softly on the polished floor. Her husband, David, stood beside her in a navy suit, and their son, Miles, clutched a backpack covered in science patches. They didn't talk much, but their presence turned heads not because they were loud or flashy, but because there was something different about them. Something intentional, powerful, polished. They approached gate 17, first class boarding just minutes away. The line was short, but the tension was about to stretch long. "Excuse me," a sharp voice called out as they stepped into the first-class queue. "This line is for first-class passengers only." The voice belonged to Sharon, a flight attendant in her late 40s with a tight bun and an even tighter expression. Her tone carried the kind of authority that assumed obedience, and the kind of judgment that didn't wait for facts. David stopped politely and showed her the tickets. "We're in 2A, 2B, and 2C. Sharon barely glanced at them. Her lips curled slightly. "You must be mistaken. Coach is boarding at gate 19. That's just around the corner." "No," Amara replied, her voice like velvet over steel. "We're on this flight, first class." Sharon's expression didn't soften. Instead, she gave a small, disbelieving laugh. "I'll have to verify. Please step aside for a moment." The pause in boarding was enough to draw eyes. A businessman behind them shifted impatiently. A woman holding a yoga mat blinked at the scene, her brow furrowing. Miles looked up at his mother, his young face trying to read hers. "Are we in trouble?" he asked quietly. Amara crouched to his level, brushing a hand gently over his hair. "No, baby, but someone is about to be." Sharon walked off with a huff, muttering into her radio. Amara stood back up slowly, her expression unreadable. She had been here before, not in this exact place, but in this moment, when her skin color had triggered suspicion before her words were heard. And yet, she had learned long ago not to shrink in those moments, but to rise. David took a breath, glanced at his wife, and gave a subtle nod. "Same story, different uniform," he murmured. After several minutes, Sharon returned, her face smug. "There's been a technical issue with your seats. It looks like they've been reassigned to other passengers. We can accommodate you on the next flight. Coach class is open." David's jaw clenched. "We paid for these seats. They're clearly printed on the ticket. This isn't a technical issue, it's a personal one. I don't make the rules," Sharon said, hands on her hips. "I just follow them." "No," Amara corrected gently. "You bend them for the people you expect to be in first class and break them for those you don't." The crowd was paying attention now. Whispers moved like wind through tall grass. Someone began filming with a phone, holding it low but clearly recording. "We'd appreciate you not causing a scene," Sharon added, lowering her voice. Amara let out a breath, not one of surrender, but one of preparation. "You made the scene. We're just standing in it." As security approached, called by Sharon for assistance, Amara reached into her purse and pulled out her phone. Her fingers moved fast as she typed a message to her executive assistant. David turned to Miles. "You okay?" Miles nodded slowly. "Are we still flying?" Amara looked down at her son, then up at the gate. Her calm never cracked. "Oh yes," she said. "We're flying, but just not in the way she thinks." As they were escorted from the gate area under confused glances and sideways stares, none of the passengers knew they were witnessing the start of something far bigger than a boarding dispute. Because while the world around them still judged success by suit color, skin shade, and last names, it was about to learn that power doesn't need permission. It just needs a boarding pass. 10 minutes passed, each one heavier than the last. Sharon stood off to the side, arms folded, glancing at the Benson family with thinly veiled irritation. Passengers continued to board, some watching the family with curiosity, others pretending not to notice. But the silence surrounding them was loud. Eventually Sharon returned, this time with a young man trailing behind her. He was tall and lanky, with a pale complexion and a nervous twitch in his left eye. His name tag read Kyle, and the badge below it confirmed he was a customer service supervisor, though he looked like he barely supervised his own confidence. "There's us," Kyle stammered, not meeting anyone's eyes. "There's been a mistake with your booking." Amara raised an eyebrow. "A mistake?" Kyle nodded quickly, swallowing hard. "Yes, your seats were reassigned due to an unexpected change in the manifest." "To whom?" David asked, his voice measured but clearly pressing for truth. Before Kyle could respond, Sharon jumped in. "To real VIP," she said with a forced smile. "People who belong in first class. Now, if you'll just cooperate, we can get you rebooked on another flight. Coach has plenty of space." The words hung in the air like smoke, thick, bitter, impossible to ignore. Amara's lips pressed together, not in anger but in focus. She stared at Sharon for a long second, then tilted her head slightly. "What's your name?" she asked calmly. Sharon frowned. "Why?" "Because you'll want to remember it," Amara said, reaching into her bag, along with the name Benson. "That's B-N-S-O-N. Sharon rolled her eyes and scoffed. "Are you threatening me now?" "No," Amara replied, now unlocking her phone and switching to camera mode. "I'm just recording for documentation. You understand, right?" That was the moment the temperature shifted. Sharon's confident stance faltered for a second. Kyle looked like he wanted to melt into the floor. Passengers nearby began pulling out their own phones, subtly raising them, pretending to scroll but clearly preparing to capture anything that might go viral. Sharon turned sharply and signaled security with a quick flick of her hand. Within moments, 2 uniformed guards approached. One was tall and broad-shouldered, the other, a shorter woman with sharp eyes and a hand on her belt. "Is there a problem here?" the male guard asked. "Yes," Sharon said quickly. "This family is causing a scene and refusing to cooperate with boarding procedures." Amara didn't raise her voice. She didn't move an inch. She simply looked into the camera and said, "We've been told we were removed from first class because other passengers were deemed more suitable, despite our tickets, despite paying full price. Despite following every rule." David stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "We're being asked to leave not because we're disruptive, but because someone assumed we don't belong here." Sharon interrupted. "Sir, we've explained the seating has changed. These things happen." Amara smiled slightly. "Yes, but they don't happen to everyone. They happen to people like us." The guards exchanged glances. The woman looked uncertain, but the male guard gave a tight nod. "I'm sorry, but we have to ask you to come with us." David gently took Miles's hand. "Let's go." As they walked past the gate and back toward the terminal, Miles looked up at his parents. His brows were drawn together, his young voice small. "Why do they think we don't belong?" David didn't answer right away. He glanced at Amara, then down at their son. "They think that," he said, voice low and deliberate, "because they've never been corrected." Amara squeezed Miles's shoulder. "But don't worry, sweetheart, they're about to be." They reached a quiet seating area in the terminal near the executive lounges. Amara's fingers flew across her phone, typing out a message to Tasha, her executive assistant. "Gate 17, immediate escalation, discrimination incident, Need Tom or VP level contact ASAP. Video and names secured. She hit send. David leaned in. Do we make a statement now? Amara shook her head. Not yet. Let them think we're just passengers. Let them get comfortable in their assumption. Then we show them who they really kicked off that plane. The Benson family was led to a private waiting area just off the main terminal. A sterile room with cream walls, outdated magazines, and the kind of stiff leather chairs that squeaked when you sat down. A young agent offered them water and apologies, but avoided eye contact. It was clear the staff didn't quite know who they were dealing with yet. But Amara Benson knew exactly what she was doing. As soon as they sat, she pulled out her phone and started typing. Her fingers moved swiftly, every tap purposeful. She sent a message to her executive assistant, Tasha. Gate 17. Incident with staff, racial profiling. Get Tom Hargrove now. Full urgency, make it loud. Tasha responded within seconds on it. Eat a 5 mins, legal looped in. David sat next to her, bouncing his leg restless, angry. I know you've handled worse, he said, but I'm still ready to walk back to that gate and make a scene. We don't need to raise our voices, Amara replied softly. We'll let position speak louder than protest today. Miles sat between them, sipping his juice box. Why are we waiting here if they were wrong? Amara looked at her son and smiled gently. Because sometimes the people who make the mess don't realize how big it is until the boss walks in. Exactly 4 minutes and 30. 2 seconds later, the glass door to the room burst open, and in hurried Tom Hargrove, the airline's vice president of customer experience. His red face glistened with sweat, and his tie was halfway undone, as though he'd run the whole length of the terminal. Mrs. Benson, he said, nearly tripping over a chair, I am so sorry. There's been a grave mistake, an inexcusable one. Sharon stood nearby, arms crossed, having followed them in under the assumption that she was still in control of the situation. Her eyes narrowed as she saw Tom, her superior, directing his full attention to Amara. Wait, Sharon interrupted, frowning. Why is he apologizing to them? Tom turned slowly toward her, his expression tightening like a lid about to blow. He straightened his jacket, trying to gather himself. Do you have any idea who this is? Sharon blinked, confused. She claimed she's someone important. She didn't claim anything, Tom snapped. That's Amara Benson, the Amara Benson, CEO of Ascend Air, the holding company that owns and operates this entire airline. The silence that followed was heavier than a storm cloud. Sharon's face went slack. Her mouth opened, but no words came out. She looked from Tom to Amara, then to the child she had indirectly humiliated. Tom wasn't done. She's not just a VIP, he continued, voice firm. She's the woman who signs your paycheck, and she just witnessed you profiling her entire family in front of passengers, staff, and cameras. Sharon's complexion drained from pink to white in seconds. I didn't know. I just thought. That's the problem. Amara interjected, rising to her feet slowly. You thought, you assumed, you didn't ask, you didn't check. You saw a black family in first class and decided we didn't belong. I didn't mean, but you did, Ms. Sharon. Amara said, her voice calm, composed, and cutting. You meant exactly what you demonstrated, that people like us must explain ourselves more, prove ourselves harder, and wait longer for the privilege of being treated like human beings. Tom cleared his throat. Mrs. Benson, again, I cannot apologize enough. I'm not looking for an apology. Amara said, I'm looking for accountability, and believe me, I'll get it. Sharon turned to David, then to Miles. I didn't know who you were. David stood now too. You didn't have to. That's the whole point. Tom gestured to a nearby assistant. We've rebooked you, of course, but we've also arranged a private jet to take you home if you prefer, full amenities, anything you need. Amara raised an eyebrow. What I need is a full report on what policies are in place to prevent this from happening again, and I expect your training program to include today's footage, so that your staff understands what leadership looks like and what bias costs. Tom nodded immediately. Yes, ma'am, absolutely. Sharon opened her mouth again, but Amara simply turned to her, composed and unflinching. You saw a black woman and decided I was disposable, she said, but the only thing being thrown away today is your career. Just as the tension in the lounge reached its peak, a side door opened with a quiet whoosh. A woman in a sleek navy uniform entered, calm, composed, and unmistakably high-ranking. Her badge simply read A. Rayner Executive Concierge, Mrs. Benson. She said with a polite nod, "Your aircraft is ready. Please allow me to escort you and your family." Amara returned the nod and took a deep breath, lifting her bag with slow grace. David stood beside her, resting a reassuring hand on Miles's shoulder. They were done explaining, done defending. Tom stepped aside as they passed, but turned sharply toward Sharon, who stood frozen near the wall. Her mouth twitched, as if trying to form an argument, but the words wouldn't come. "You're suspended," Tom said coldly. "Effective immediately. HR will contact you regarding the next steps." Sharon's eyes widened. "Wait, Tom, please. I didn't know who she was. I just thought." Tom held up a hand. "Exactly, you thought, you judged, and your assumptions almost cost this company its credibility and your career. Actually," he paused, "no, it just did." Sharon's mouth opened again, but this time it was Amara who spoke, pausing just long enough at the threshold. "That's the problem," she said, her tone controlled but piercing. "You judged without knowing. You assumed we didn't belong, but the truth is." She stepped forward slightly, looking Sharon dead in the eyes. "We built the sky you work in." Sharon flinched. Amara didn't wait for a reply. She simply turned and walked away. Miles tugged at her hand as they followed the concierge toward a glass corridor leading to the private airstrip. "Mom," he whispered, "that was awesome." Amara looked down at him with a smile, the fire in her eyes softening. "No, baby," she said gently, "that was justice." Behind them, the door to the lounge hissed shut, sealing away the noise, the stares, the indignity. Ahead of them, sunlight gleamed through the windows, casting a golden glow over the sleek, silver jet bearing the Ascend Air logo, her logo, on the tail. The walk was long but quiet, almost ceremonial. Every staff member they passed stood straighter. Some nodded respectfully, some offered soft greetings, but none dared question her place anymore. The jet's interior was nothing like a commercial plane. Plush cream leather seats, gold trim, a private bedroom. Full catering, the pilot himself stood at the entryway, hat in hand. "Mrs. Benson, it's an honor. We're ready for departure whenever you are." She extended a hand with grace. "Thank you, Captain. We'll get settled shortly." As Miles explored the jet in wide wonder and David placed their bags in overhead compartments, Amara took a moment at the window. From this view, she could see the regular gate, the one they'd been denied at hours earlier. Passengers still lined up. Business as usual, but for her this wasn't business as usual. This was personal. This was proof that no matter how high you rise, there are still people waiting to pull you down unless you remind them just how high you fly. She sat beside her son, who was now curled up in a seat larger than his bedroom armchair. He leaned into her. "Mom, will people always treat us like that?" "Some will," she said truthfully, "but when they do, you remember what we did today." Miles looked up. "We didn't yell, we didn't cry. No," Amara said, "we stood tall, we used our power, and we walked away with dignity intact." David joined them, wrapping his arm around her. "We also walked away with a jet." They all laughed softly. As the engines roared to life, Amara picked up her phone and typed another message to Tasha. "Schedule full review with HR. Begin DI retraining across all airline subsidiaries. File video and transcript under Incident A17. She hit send, leaned back, and finally closed her eyes. The plane lifted off, smooth, silent, dignified. And this time, there was no one questioning whether they belonged. By the next morning, the internet had erupted. What had begun as an uncomfortable incident at Gate 17 quickly became a global conversation. A fellow passenger, an observant college student sitting nearby, had recorded the entire confrontation discreetly. Her caption read, "Family kicked off plane for being black. Turns out they OWN the airline." Within hours, the video had over 10 million views. Major news networks picked it up. Twitter trended with the hashtags #flying, while black and #CEOJustice. Talk shows discussed it. Influencers posted reaction videos. Even a few celebrities reshared the clip with the phrase, "Put some respect on her name." Sharon's face, once dismissive and smirking, was now splashed across headlines. Her expression frozen in the moment she realized the woman she had tried to humiliate actually ran the company she worked for. The airline's PR department scrambled, releasing a formal apology. Sharon was terminated effective immediately, with the HR director stating, "There is zero tolerance for discrimination at any level of our operation." Sharon later issued a public apology through a shaky Instagram Live, where she said she deeply regretted her actions and never meant to offend anyone. But by then, it was too late. The damage was done, and the world had seen it. Still, Amara Benson didn't revel in revenge. Instead, she responded with leadership. That afternoon, she issued an official statement, not just to the press, but to all employees under Ascend Air's corporate umbrella. This isn't about one woman or one mistake. This is about an industry that needs to look in the mirror. Discrimination, whether subtle or loud, cannot board our aircraft. We are responsible for the skies we fly in. Today, I'm announcing the launch of Skywise, a mandatory training and accountability initiative focused on bias awareness, customer dignity, and inclusive service in all areas of our aviation network. It's not enough to say we don't tolerate racism. We must prove it in every seat, every gate, every conversation. The sky should never be a place where people feel small. We don't just fly airplanes, we set the altitude of progress. The statement landed like a thunderclap. Aviation blogs, diversity advocates, and even Fortune 500 executives reposted her words. CNN, BBC, and Bloomberg all ran special segments. One news anchor called it one of the most profound corporate responses to bias in years. Ascend Air's stock price rose 8% in 24 hours. The announcement sparked dialogue in boardrooms across the country. Other airlines were forced to confront their training policies. Consultants began citing the Skywise initiative as the new standard for inclusive leadership, and letters began pouring into Amara's inbox, thousands of them. Messages from flight attendants, frequent flyers, Black professionals, working mothers, and teenage girls who finally saw someone who looked like them refusing to be silent. Among the thousands, one message stood out. It was from a 9-year-old girl named Malia who wrote, "I saw you on the news. When I grow up, I want to fly my own plane and own the company too." Amara printed that one and pinned it to the wall of her office. Later that week, as she boarded her jet for a board meeting in Seattle, Amara took a moment by the window. The engines purred quietly, the sky stretched wide and brilliant above them. Miles climbed into the seat beside her, holding a new book. He looked up with the same curiosity he always had. "Think people will treat us better now?" he asked. Amara turned to him with a thoughtful smile. "Some will," she said. "Others might just try not to get caught. But the important thing, Miles," she added, placing a hand over his, "is that we know we belong. You belong, and the sky." She looked out again, letting the horizon remind her of everything they'd overcome. "It has no limits." The jet lifted off moments later, climbing steadily above the clouds where power met purpose, and where justice soared. What happened to the Benson family was more than just an insult. It was a mirror held up to a system still plagued by assumptions and prejudice. But Amara Benson didn't just clap back. She changed the narrative. She turned humiliation into a teaching moment, power into purpose, and silence into a roar heard around the world. Her actions reminded everyone watching that dignity doesn't wear a color, and success doesn't ask for permission. Whether in business or 30,000 feet above the clouds, respect is earned not by appearance but by integrity. The Benson family's story became a symbol of hope, justice, and grace under pressure, and for Sharon and many others, it became a wake-up call that the world is changing fast. If this story moved you, inspired you, or opened your eyes to the power of standing up with dignity, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel. Every day, we share powerful stories that reveal the hidden truths, bold actions, and quiet heroes shaping our world. Airplane, what would you have done if you were Amara? Drop your thoughts below. We're reading every comment. Movie camera, until next time, remember, real power isn't loud, it's undeniable. Thanks for watching. Stay strong. Stay aware, stay rising.